Welcome to the Full Nilsson. Today I'm going to be reviewing this Vortex Viper rifle scope. So this particular model has 6 to 20 power with a 50mm objective lens. And it has the mil-dot reticle. Now there's some things I really like about this rifle scope and some things I really don't like. So we'll start out with the things that I like, and then I'll move on to the things that I don't like and tell you whether or not I would recommend it or not. Now, the things that I like about this rifle scope. The scope holds 0, and it has been durable. I've had this mounted on 3 different rifles. 2 of them are 300 Winchester Magnums, and the other one was a 308. I probably put 500 rounds through my 300 Win Mag with this particular scope on the gun, and it has never lost 0, never had any problems with it that way. Never had any problems with it on my 308, anything. So the scope seems to be durable, it holds 0. The other thing is the scope tracks well. I've never sat down and done an actual tracking test or anything like that. I just, when I go out to shoot, pull out my ballistic calculator and say, okay, it's that distance, and I dial it, and when I return to 0, I see it returns to 0, and it has always returned to 0 properly. It has always seemed to track properly, which is really important. The glass quality, I think, is really good on a scope for this price. For $450, I don't know if I've ever seen a rifle scope that has better glass quality for that price. So the glass is great, the durability is great, the scope tracks properly. Now for some of the things that I don't like. One of the things that I don't particularly like is I don't particularly like the scope or the capped turrets, because it's kind of a compromise. Basically what they're doing is making a weaker, chintzier, less durable turret here, and then they're putting a cap on top of it to protect it. I don't really like the idea of that. I actually tried hunting one time and left the turrets off of these, and I had one of these get screws come out of the turret. And I understand it wasn't designed to be made that way, but it's kind of pointless to have a scope that tracks properly and all that kind of stuff. And yet you cap the turret so that when I'm out there hunting and I need to dial something in a hurry, I've got to pull these caps off. So I don't particularly like the idea of cap turrets. If you're a hunter and you just put your scope on 100-yard 0 and you leave it that way, that may be fine, but I guess I feel like there's a lot of optics that if you're just going to leave them zeroed all the time that are less money than this, and you don't necessarily have to have a scope that's going to track properly or anything, you just need a scope that will hold 0, that you could save quite a bit of money over going with an optic like this if that's all you're after. So I don't like the cap turrets. The turrets themselves have pretty positive clicks. But the second thing I don't like about the turrets is the way you zero these turrets is instead of undoing a screw and pulling the turret off and then putting it back on and tighten up the screw on 0, you simply lift the entire turret. It's got a little spring in here. You lift it up when you've got it zeroed and spin the dial to 0 and let go. And I don't like that because I have on one occasion accidentally picked up, when I was messing with my rifle or carrying it or something, I accidentally lifted that thing up when I turned it and completely lost 0. I had no idea where my 0 was from that point on. Now I understand that's my fault. I totally recognize that. I like the idea of it being dummy proof. The reason why Vortex and all their other scopes, when they use, just a regular turret that's uncapped, a beefier turret and stuff like that, or any company for that matter, the reason why they have the screws in it to set the 0 and stuff like that is to make them dummy proof so that you can't do anything stupid like I did. It's kind of important. I mean, say for example, I hadn't grabbed it, say you even just brushed up against something and bumped it that pulled that away a little bit, and then you lost your 0. That would not be cool. So I don't like that spring-loaded turret idea to set your 0. The last thing I don't like is the durability of these particular turrets. I've had one of them pop off on me on a hunt. The whole turret just completely popped off. and there's no way to put the screw back in because there's just one center screw, and they cover it by gluing this little label on here. And so I had to pry that label up with my knife or flathead screwdriver and then drive the screw back in so that I had a scope that I could actually adjust while I was on my hunt. So what I ended up doing later, maybe you can see that. Let's see here. So I drilled a hole in the top of that. So now I can actually get to the screw that's inside of there and still have the label on top. I don't know why they didn't do that in the first place. Maybe they didn't want people messing around with things. But the fact that it popped off of there and there was no way for me to get it on and still have my label to know what the heck I was doing with my turret was kind of a pain. So I don't particularly like the turret design, having cap turrets and then basically building less beefy turrets as a result of that. And the way you set the zero, where you lift it up and you can just spin it and reset the zero that way. And the last thing I don't like about this rifle scope, and this is the biggest thing I don't like about it, is the fact that the scope reticle is a mil-dot reticle, so it's in mils is the way measurement for the reticle, and the turrets are MOA turrets. Now, at the time I bought this rifle scope, I didn't know any better, and I actually ended up buying a different Vortex rifle scope anyway. I ended up with this rifle scope at some point, but I didn't know any better about the MOA matching up with mil-dot reticle. I was, a newcomer to long distance shooting, stuff like that. And take the time, if you don't understand that right now, take the time to understand that. I'll try to explain it as best I can, but basically the way it is if you have a mil-dot reticle or any reticle that is measured in mils, each mil is 3.4 or roughly 3.4 minutes of angle. These turrets on this particular scope adjust in minutes of angle. So what that means is if you're shooting at a target and you see, oh, wait a minute, I'm 1 mil low and 1 mil left, and you need to dial 1 mil up and 1 mil right, rather than simply looking at your turrets and saying, okay, I'll dial 1 mil up and 1 mil right, you have to say, okay, well, it's 1 mil, this is in minutes of angle, so I need 3.4 minutes of angle up and 3.4 to the right. That may not sound like that big of a deal, but what happens when you have to dial 2 or 3 minutes of angle, or 2 or 3 mils going up, or 2.5 mils going up, or anything like that? It just adds a huge level of complication to being able to shoot, see where you hit, dial in a correction, and hit your target. So it is extremely irritating. So that is my biggest hang up with this rifle scope, is that the reticle does not match the adjustments on the turrets. If you're shopping for a rifle scope, make sure that the reticle matches the adjustments for the turrets. Other than that, the scope's extremely durable. It has decent glass for the price. It holds, it holds zero, all that kind of stuff like I talked about. It tracks well. Everything else on it's good, except for I don't particularly care for the turret design. That's, not really the biggest hang up or anything like that. It's just that the freaking turrets don't match the reticle. That's extremely obnoxious when it comes to long range shooting or any shooting for that matter, and you're trying to use your reticle to measure and dial in a correction. It really makes a mess of things. Why any manufacturer makes a rifle scope that has a reticle that doesn't match the turrets, I don't know. But there are a ton of them out there that do that, and they need to stop. It's not just Vortex, it's lots of companies. And they should certainly know better themselves. And there's a lot of shooters that don't know better, and so they end up buying these things. And anyway, so make sure your turrets match the reticle. Other than that, the scope's an excellent scope for the money. If you are looking to buy a rifle scope for long distance shooting or precision shooting, I would not recommend this one. I'll probably get into some other options later that are less expensive and work much better for long range shooting or precision shooting, because the reticle matches the turrets are beefier, things of that nature. So this would not get my recommendation to go out and buy this scope for the money. It does hold zero, it is durable, but those things I've talked about would keep me from buying one of these, and I would strongly recommend other people don't buy that rifle scope because of that reason. It's not because of any durability or defect with the rifle scope, anything like that. Vortex's customer service is top notch, is absolutely stellar, and this particular scope I've never had any issues with it not holding zero or tracking properly or braking or anything like that. And you know, I shoot my 300 Win Mag quite a bit, so I don't think you're going to have any issues with it that way. It's just that for precision shooting, competition shooting, long range shooting, the reticle and the turrets not matching is a big no-no. So doesn't get my recommendation, especially for the price, but you know, there are some good things about it. So that's my review of the Vortex Viper 6.5 by 20 by 50 with the mil-dot reticle. If you guys have any questions or comments, you can ask me and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks. Bye.